It's not good. All right. Excuse me. All right, everybody. Welcome. Let's just bring James in since I can't talk. James is here. Half of Pugs and Parker. Hi, folks. Welcome to Pugs and Parker. We do this every night at 9 o'clock, Monday through Thursday, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. I don't know what's going on with my throat. I just all of a sudden started to talk and it didn't sound right. Hi, James.
My throat sounds fantastic, so I'll carry the load if need be. Although, am I to understand? Can we just go ahead and get into it? Are we to have guests today? A guest today?
Yeah, we are going to be talking with, on Thursday, James, okay, hold on. First of all, why are you
Way
dressed?
ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Way ahead of ourselves.
Why are you dressed like you're trying to sell me life insurance in my living room? What is going on with this?
Well, because do you know that your loved ones are going to be taken care of if something should happen?
Well, I'm not giving it much thought. Why don't you have a seat? Can I get you some coffee? Maybe something a little stronger? No, why are you dressed like this? Why is this because if this is now a thing, I can outsuit you. If you want to outsuit each other, you want to try and get more and more elaborately dressed for every show, I can do that.
Yeah, we can we look, there's nothing wrong with looking nice and looking your best. There's nothing wrong with, if I'm feeling handsome, then damn it, I'm going to dress handsome. So I'm having a handsome day. And so this is just how I'm expressing myself today. There's no, does there need to be an occasion for me to look good?
There does not need to be an occasion. No, handsome. You're having a handsome day. Say no more. That's fine. That's good. I wish you all the luck in the world with that. But now, just so you know, I'm gonna have to start wearing like shirts and ties and suit jackets and all that. I can play that game if that's where we're going. Why not dress up in your own living room? I don't have anywhere to go. I got all these great clothes. They're just hanging in my closet. They never get worn. Why not wear them on the show?
As much as I complain about New Orleans, that's one thing I do miss about it, culturally speaking. I ended up in a tux at least 4 times a year. They were often doing things that required formal attire, and then there was a lot of stuff that was just like that next level down, where you better be wearing a suit, and I don't mean like a leisure suit from Dumb and Dumber. I mean like a black suit with the red power tie, and we don't have that much in Buck Tussle, but we didn't really have it that much when I lived in Dallas for 7 years either.
No, Dallas is a sport coat, jeans, and boots. That's how when everything is like semi-formal. You can wear blue jeans, you can wear boots, but you wear a shirt and a sport coat. That's sort of like the way the moneyed class runs around Dallas. Different than New York City because they're wearing jeans. That's
Well, what do they do in Chicago? How often, if you live in Chicago and you have a job like we have, how often are you wearing a tux?
a job like we have, like let's just say we're radio people.
Yeah,
We're not probably
not radio stars, just Midland radio.
No, never. Not so much that we would own our own tux. No, we would probably. I have never had to even rent a tux or anything. So I've never had any use for a tux other than weddings. That's it.
That I find that absolutely wild. I own a tux.
Okay, fancy you. Hope you get out of you there and bug tussle with your fancy tux.
I only had to wear it once last year. I own a tux and I have like 4 different bow ties, and I can actually tie a bow tie, and I have a green one, and I have a black one that's a tie, and I have a black one that's just a clip, and yeah.
Not me. I want to tuck
matching kerchief. All right, screw that. So get everyone caught up. So Thursday, you announced the next project.
So on Thursday, I'm looking like it's a joint project now, since the trailer promo that you made for it seems to have been so widely well appreciated and received. James, you made a nice little video based on our announcement on Thursday that we would be starting a podcast based on the rise and fall and all the stories that go there within of Live 105.3, a radio station that James and I worked at, the station we met at. What are you doing? You want to show the video you made?
That kind of seems appropriate after you finish your little spiel here.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty good. Yeah, I was hoping you would be pulling it up. I didn't mean to just.
Oh, okay. Well,
all right, James, here's a nice little promo video that James made. I am working on my memoirs, James, and I am burning every motherfucking bridge that there is out there, and I am blowing up every fucking person with a name that people might know, and I'm going to produce the podcast, Who Killed Live 1053? And it will tell the story from beginning to end of exactly what a missed opportunity Live 1053 was because of the actions of some assholes. There was some assholery going on there, and I'm done not talking about it. And we're going to tell all the stories, and we're going to allow people the freedom to untether themselves from whatever burdens they may have been holding on to for 10 years.
Thanks for 7 great years of radio.
And so Opie's sitting there on the chair, and as Russ walked through the door, Opie said really loud, "Hey, is that Russ Martin dick?" I will attempt over the next few episodes to tell the full story of the rise and fall of one of the most successful yet short-lived radio stations in American broadcast history. Who killed Live 1053? Well now, fans. That was wonderful, James. Now I feel like I almost have to go through with it, which, was pretty much just a flight of fancy until you produced that up. So anyway, a wonderful response to that you made and then started circulating on social media and whatnot. A number of people have reached out. There has not been one negative reach out. Not one person that's like, I can't believe. It's just the opposite. It's everybody going, I got a story to tell. I hope you can find the time to talk to me because I've got some stories out. So all of that's happening. And then today, the Dallas Observer reached out to me and gave them a nice little interview on the subject of the forthcoming podcast. They seem to be very interested in it, so we'll see where that goes. Anyway, to that end, I thought we'd make it official, and I wanted to bring in another person who I have been sort of conspiring with on this whole thing here. You want to talk? We want to bring in Richard Hunter. We can bring in Richard Hunter on today's show. James, how do you feel? You good with that?
Absolutely, we can bring in Richard Hunter. Why would anyone object to that?
Do people remember?
Is he on your phone?
Yeah. It's got to be on the phone.
You didn't have it set up already?
No.
You're so unprepared.
Hello.
I'm here. Hello.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's BDH.
Hey, guys.
Known to millions as Big Dick Hunter, Richard Hunter. Okay, so first of all, James is already busting my balls, as the kids like to say, over me not being prepared. But would you please explain to him why you're on the phone?
I'm just on the move. I wasn't going to be in front of a computer at my house, and I'm having some remodeling done in the house, so my studio's all ripped apart. Well, who am I kidding? Look, let me be honest. We're being honest, right? I had some plastic surgery done,
Yeah.
and it was just bad timing. I didn't know you were going to be so a couple of weeks. They say that the bandages come off, and I'll come on again with video if you guys want to do it then.
Very good.
With my new face.
Now, Richard, of course, was one of the hosts at Live 1053. He is going. I've invited him to come in and play an active role, whether he can define it. James, you define. We're all just a bunch of guys playing in a sandbox here, trying to make a really cool castle. So, James, do you and Richard know one another? Did your 10 years overlap to any degree there at 1053?
We weren't employed by the station at the same time, but I've probably met Richard like 6 different times now.
Yeah.
Richard, do you remember meeting James?
Well, yeah, different events, or there was some dodgeball or something, or kickball or whatever.
Yeah, there was one really cool time when y'all were doing Rational Radio, and I came in and when that what it's called, Rational Radio. Yeah, and there was the UFC weigh-in at Victory Plaza right next to the AA Center or whatever, AAC, and we walked over to that, and that's the first time I'd been to one of those events. And apparently Richard was known by enough people that we just walked to the back, and I don't know. I thought that was really cool. So we've had a few little.
I think we actually weighed in and fought, didn't we? I think that's how connected I was.
Uh, How
Wow.
bad would I do in those arenas? No, but for me, I know Richard Hunter as the producer on the Hotspot. That's where I first was exposed to Richard Hunter.
Well,
That is going way back.
I don't even know what that is. What is the hotspot?
So I'll explain this. So the hotspot was the nighttime show at the Ticket before my nighttime show at the Ticket.
Okay, so before the
And
Wild Ass Circus, there was a show
yeah,
called The Hotspot. Okay.
there was a hotspot. And so when I got hired by the Ticket, it was to produce the hotspot. And so I was the producer of the hotspot. The hotspot got canceled after a year, and then I became the new nighttime host, and then we did the Wild Eye Circus for 3 years.
Who was the host of the Hotspot?
It was Kevin Blandford and David Robinson,
Oh.
and yeah, I don't know where. I mean, Kevin had a background in radio. He'd worked at a number of places. I was not familiar with him before he came to the Ticket, but I wasn't familiar with a lot of people then. I just kind of knew the Ticket, because I'd started out as a listener there. And then David, I think he came from he might have been kind of a peripheral character like on K104 or one of those, maybe like KKDA, one of those stations, I think.
Was it a sports show? The Hotspot?
Yeah, yeah, it was. It was a sports show, and I was a producer, and I was not a good producer. I was good for on air contribution, I guess,
Yeah.
but I wasn't your guy to be tracking down the third string defensive back for the Cowboys or something to see if he could come on and talk to us about moving to the 3-2 defense or
Let me just
whatever
point.
they
Let me
used to
just
go
point
on and on
something out.
about.
Point
Yeah.
something out here for the listener who may not understand. The absolute worst thing that you can be in the eyes of a show host is a producer who's only good on the air. That is that is the least wanted thing by any host. He wants you to be able to cut tape quickly. He wants you to
Yeah.
be able to book people that he can't get. He doesn't care if you're good. So you found your lane there at the Ticket as a host after having been a failed producer. Boy,
Well, yeah, and this is what's weird about that. It never occurred to me anybody would use me as a host. So what I remember about that was the show was canceled, and at the same time it was, if I remember this correctly, I think what happened was it was canceled, and I remember hearing like, "Uh-oh," in terms of like, will I still have a job? And I thought, well, maybe I'm going to produce whatever takes its spot. And the program director calls me in and he goes, "How would you feel about doing the show?" And I was like, well, I'm here. I'm thinking about it for the first time.
So who was that? Was that Kat or was that Bruce?
No, that was not Jeff Catlin.
It was Bruce.
Yeah, that poor guy made a second career out of trying to figure out how to get rid of me. But
I got one of them in my life too.
Oh yeah. But
Same.
this was Bruce Gilbert. Bruce Gilbert was the program director
the
there.
great Bruce Gilbert.
Yeah, he was fantastic, and he had this whole vision. He was like, "No, you would be great at this," and I remember him saying, "Just do." I was like, "Well, what am I going to do? What kind of show is this going to be like?" I
don't like sports or no sports, and you're giving me a show on one of America's most highly regarded sports stations.
Right, and he was like, "Well, just be you." And so, what I ended up doing was my sports was getting the weirdo characters like Dennis Rodman and Jose Canseco at the time, and people like that to join the crew, so to speak, and be part of the show, and they do stuff with us. Yeah, the
free thinkers like Stepnoski, right? And
Yeah,
guys like that, the guys that were a little
Wait,
bit
so
fringe, but
what year are we talking about that you came on with the Hotspot?
Okay, so that would have been 2000. I'm going to say 2003, maybe, or 4, because I think our show started in 2005. or 6.
That seems too late. That seems too late. That seems like I think more like maybe 2000, 2001, because I do not remember the hotspot. And I started
Oh, wait. You're right. I remember. Okay,
You
thank
were
you.
already doing Wild Ass Circus by
Yes,
2004.
yes. I know why it was 2001 because I was there when 9/11 happened, and I remember that when 9/11 happened, they brought this giant world map into the studio so everybody could try to figure out where Iraq was. And they started doing that, and they started airing these like they whoever our like voiceover guy was, he was like one of those big voice guys.
Yeah.
Normally he would do all the, guy talk for guys who like being guys and all that. And so after 9/11, his was like this heartfelt. He would just come on with no music underneath. He'd just be like, "Hey, I know we know we're all family here, and the time for us to come together and the time to have fun will come again. But for now," and then what they would do is they would play Fox News all night long overnight. That was their idea of like, we're gonna focus on what's important now. We'll just play Fox News all night.
We're going to serve the community.
That's right. Because you couldn't get that anywhere else.
No. We're talking with Richard Hunter, former Live 105.3 host, friend of mine, friend of James, friends of all of DFW. Now, this is sort of taking an interesting turn, what we've just organically started talking about here. I don't think that I've ever heard. Now, I'm a big Ticket fan, but I don't think I've ever heard like these stories from you before about the early days of the Ticket. I was always led to believe, and tell me if I have this right or wrong, but you, Richard Hunter, Danny Bayless, and Gordon Keith were all like what, interns together?
No, not exactly. Those guys are a little bit older than me, just by like a year. I think Danny's the oldest, and Gordon might be a year older than me, something like that. But
Okay.
anyway, so I was just a caller to the Hardline show,
Yeah.
and so was Danny.
Yeah,
That's how.
Danny
Yeah,
was the faxer, right? Wasn't that Danny's bit where
yeah.
he would fax in jokes at the end of the show?
That's it. He would
Yeah.
fax, he would do song parodies. And so we knew each other through that. Gordon, I actually knew some people who knew him. I had met him a few years back, I think even before he worked at the Ticket, just through some mutual friends, but we didn't know each other real well or anything like that. So I was just like playing in a band. I didn't have I'd never thought for a second about ever being in radio. But I just started. One of the guys in my band turned me on to the Ticket, and you're right. While I wasn't a sports fan, I did. I liked the on air chemistry aspect of it. I liked it when they talked about music, stuff like that. So anyway, just because I was a caller to the show, I got to be friends with Mike Reiner, and he's 20 years older than I am, but we have a lot in common. Like we have a lot of the same interests in music and just a lot of stuff. So we just got to be friends, totally independent of anything having to do with radio. And so one day, just kind of out of nowhere, he said to me, "Hey, why don't we just take like a cassette recorder?" I think we were still using at the time. He's like, "Take a cassette recorder, go out on the street, talk to people, and give it to me." And that was all he said. So I like, all right. So I just took a cassette recorder. I started like interviewing people about, what was in their purse or whatever. And they basically started using it on the air. And then that's how I ended up getting the gig. So the Hardline would use me as kind of like this. I guess, it would seem like I was maybe like an intern, but really they were just using me as like you know, a, a pro
A
bono,
content guy.
a
Yep.
contributor. Yeah, just a caller contributor. And then it actually didn't turn into a gig until I got that producing spot. But there was a movement at the time, like between me and Danny in particular, of like, hey, some of these guys out there that are real, they have some talent. What could we do with them? We could make them producers. And Danny, by the way, was the producer of the nighttime show before I went to before I became the hotspot producer. So he was the nighttime producer. When he moved up to the Hardline, that's when they needed somebody. That's when I came in. So our paths were very parallel that way. But I'll tell you this: it turns out in radio that when a lot of the people have pursued some sort of like actual formal education to do this, they don't get real excited when the guy that was calling the afternoon show all of a sudden turns up with a paid gig.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be that easy. Yeah,
No,
it's not. You're supposed to be like me. You're supposed to schlep coffee for free for 2 years,
that's right.
and be humiliated routinely on every day. Okay, so one last question about the ticket, and then I want to lead you into the 105.3 stuff, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Where was Corby in all this? Was Corey ahead or behind you in your
Okay,
sort of
so at the
intern
time,
class?
yeah, so at the time all this was going on, Corby was he was a producer. He was the producer of the midday show. We had a guy there named Chris Arnold who
Mhm.
came on after the morning show, and then Corby was the producer of that, and he stayed the producer of that for a good long while. And I think when Chris Arnold left, then it was kind of like, well, where do we put Corby? What do we do with him? And I believe that at that point, that's when the hardline absorbed him.
Okay. All right. So now we've left off. We're talking with Richard Hunter. So you're doing your show. The hotspot is gone. You've now launched Big Dick Hunter's Wild Ass Circus night
Right.
times on the ticket.
Yeah.
A show that I first discovered Richard from, because it was just the craziest. It was just such an interesting show.
Thank you.
It really just didn't fit with almost anything. It was almost like something you'd hear on a really cool public radio station in like New York City or something. You know what I
Oh,
mean? It just,
well, that was the idea. Thank
yeah,
you. Yeah, that was the idea.
it didn't feel like, a silly talk show, but it was interesting. Your guests were fascinating. I'll never forget the Deion Sanders and Michael Irving interview. That's like
Yeah.
the greatest thing, where it went on for like 2 hours. These two guys, Dick had backed them into a corner over some nonsense that they were involved in, and their
Yeah.
egos would not let them leave the studio. So Dick just
Right.
sliced and diced them for an hour and a half to their faces.
Well, what was funny about that was they had decided they wanted to play radio. They wanted to come on and do a 2-hour show, and so we preempted programming and all the rest of this. And yeah, the way you're describing it, that's exactly what happened. But the funny thing about the difference between those two, you can see on the one hand why they were thick as thieves, but the difference with those two is Dion is smarter than Michael Irvin. Michael Irvin always thinks that he is either the smartest guy in the room or he can talk himself out of anything. And Dion knows better. And so when all that started happening, I remember Dion sitting there and
He was
kept
trying to get him out of the room, right? He was trying to
he
pull.
kept yelling. He kept yelling into the microphone, "Shit, please! Shit, please!" Like that, like he wanted to get out of there. And Irvin was going, "No, no, 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 it's okay. No, this is good. No, well, we're getting." And I remember Irvin kept going, "We're getting to the what do you say? We're getting to the root, not the fruit of the problem."
It was crazy. It was some of the most. All right, so
Yeah.
fast forward now. So you did that show. It was very successful. A lot of people liked it. A lot of good buzz on the Wild Ass Circus. So one day, I realized that you're now on my station. The show that I used to listen to on the ticket is now suddenly appearing on 105.3. How did that come to
Yeah.
be? How did you
Was
make?
there a gap? Did you go straight from the ticket to Live 105.3? How'd that happen?
Yes, that happened. So, so what happened was, the ticket gets sold, and so I was coming up on 3 years. I had worked 3 1-year deals, and I was coming up on the end of the third year, and I had never been through a radio sale before. I had heard people talk about this horrible thing that could happen, but it happened, and this is my naivete. I made really good money there, mostly on ratings. I had a good ratings bonus structure, and Bruce Gilbert told me many years later that the show was not supposed to succeed. He said, "Oh yeah, we'd promise you anything you wanted on ratings because we didn't think it was going to work. So we're not out anything unless it does well." But it did really well with ratings. So I'd collected some nice ratings bonus checks, And I was of the naive mindset that because even though I was being paid pretty well, I made so much less compared to like morning or afternoon drive or something like that, that, well, you would want to keep this show on because it's a bargain. But what I didn't realize is that when a sale happens, all the mid-level managers, like the program directors and, you know, these kind of guys, they're all scrambling to justify their own jobs because the giant corporation that bought them, they've got people who they might want to put in those jobs and promote and things like that. So, you know, the program director, when the new owners come in, he's essentially saying, hey, look, real quick, before you fire me, I want to show you the money that I've saved here. I want to show you the plan I've laid out. So what he did, this was Jeff Catlin. What he did was he went on nights. He just went to pre-recorded programming, like syndicated stuff. So that was stuff they weren't having to pay for. So they ended up saving the money on me. So that ends. In fact, and I definitely made this known. The show was canceled. My contract was not renewed, and after about 2 weeks later, because it was right at the end of a ratings period, in the check or in the mail arrived the biggest bonus check I had ever collected off of those ratings.
Yep.
And so anyway, so there's irony there. But then what happened with 105.3 was I was in the bathroom at the American Airlines Center in my pajamas. I was there. This was in the last few weeks of the ticket. I didn't know the show was getting canceled, but in the last few weeks of the ticket, we were doing a promotion with the arena football team, the
Renegades.
Dallas. Is that what they were?
No, Desperados.
Desperados.
There
That's
you
it.
go.
Yeah,
Dallas
I'm sorry.
Desperados. Yeah.
The Renegades are the new XFL team that play.
Okay.
Here. Okay.
Yep. Dallas Desperados. And I actually did stuff. I did a coach's show with the head coach.
Coach Joe?
No, this was Will McClay. Joe was the first coach, and then they gave it to Will McClay. But we actually, again, even though I'm not a sports guy, we had a great show, and they loved they needed publicity, and they liked it, and they wanted somebody passionate. Well, anyway, it was a good fit. So we had done a promotion where it was like a slumber party kind of thing. So you could sit in a box with me, a listener, and we had like our pajamas on and big beanbag chairs and watch the football game like we were at a slumber party. So I'm in the bathroom in my pajamas and my, Hugh Hefner satin robe, and I'm washing my hands, and this guy comes up behind me and he goes, "Are you Big Dick Hunter?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm Gavin Spittle." And
wait, leave it to Gavin to be comfortable uttering that sentence in a men's room.
Hey, are you holding your organ? Let's talk business. Yeah.
Right. So that's how I met Gavin. So at first it was just kind of a meet, just a, hey, I'm aware of your show, let's do your show, whatever. And you Pugs, you and I and Kelly, we were kind of like already a little bit acquainted, maybe.
Yeah.
We hung out a little bit, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we had Bruce in common.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so anyway, so I met him that way. And then a few weeks later, I think it was a few weeks later, maybe a month, the show was canceled, the station sold, all the rest of that. So now all of a sudden I'm free. And then that's how I got over to 105.3. But it did happen real quick because there wasn't any I think I had a very small non-compete window, but I think by the time the contract was up, it might have only been like a month or two.
Now, were you brought in to replace Liz Wilde?
Oh, wow.
Or were you there before Liz Wilde?
I forgot about Liz Wilde.
He was after Liz.
He was after Liz. Okay.
I tell you what I did. I bumped Loveline. And the reason I remember that I bumped Loveline is because I got a death threat from some guy who really liked listening to Loveline.
Well, that's gonna
happen. I love Loveline.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did too, but I mean, I don't. They didn't go off the air. I think they moved them later or something. They didn't like cancel it, right. But I think they just played them later. But it was past this guy's bedtime.
I just remember like this, wasn't it?
I remember we lost Loveline to the Edge, so it went over to the Edge. That's
okay. That's. I just remember.
James,
wasn't Tom Likas on our night shift for a while?
Likas was on after me.
Okay.
Lycus
9 to
was
11.
always, yeah, he was always on after me. And yeah, that Loveline guy, I remember the death threat because it came on MySpace. That's how long ago this was. But he, he sent it from his MySpace profile. So we called the cops. Cops came up there, took the report, and the guy was real surprised when they showed up at his place of business. He's like, "How'd you find me?"
Oh, that poor guy. He had
Yeah.
no idea the onslaught of no longer being anonymous online.
No.
Anonymous tough
No.
guys. They'll catch you now. Okay, so you were brought in by Gavin. You were given the 7 o'clock. You came on after Russ Martin.
Yeah.
What was your thoughts on the station as someone who was over at the ticket and now suddenly finding yourself there? How did you look at the station as an outsider, and then as an insider, what did you come to realize?
Yeah. So from the outside, what I remember is a couple of things. I remember that when 105.3 gave way to Free FM because of Howard Stern going to satellite. Believe it or not, I thought that the David Lee Roth show could have been something.
You're the guy. You're the
if
one.
Richard.
if somebody could have produced it,
Yeah,
because
well, hold on. Let me go on record here as well, because I've said this myself. What he did, he was doing some really crazy, interesting stuff. He was playing, like mariachi music, and then he'd play it for 90 seconds, and then he'd start talking for 2 minutes, and then he'd go back to mariachi. There was some really interesting stuff there, but yeah, it was a boy for the person whose ear was tuned to accept Howard Stern. That was a hard right turn. I believe that was a broadcast sorbet. I don't think they ever intended that show to be a success. I think they just knew that whoever replaced Howard would get backlash from the audience, so they needed a sorbet before whoever they were going to move in there. Well, let everybody hate David Lee Roth, because then whoever we finally replace David Lee Roth with will at least not be David Lee Roth.
I'll have a chance. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes some sense. So I remember listening to that. I was most familiar with your show because you and Kelly were on in the mid morning or something, right? Kind of mid morning into mid afternoon.
Yeah.
Wasn't that right? Like 11 to 2 or something.
10 to 2,
10 to 3.
You guys would be the show that I would hear like when I got up, because I did a night show, so yours was the show I was normally listening to. I didn't listen to Russ Martin for a couple. I mean, I'm just, just to be candid, I just didn't get that show. I just didn't think I just didn't think he was interesting.
Yeah, but with that said, I mean, you acknowledge that crazy amount of power, right? I mean, did you see? Was there anybody at the ticket who was walking around wielding that kind of power?
Well, yeah. I mean,
well, no, I'm not saying guys at the ticket didn't have that kind of power at their disposal, but the way it was used like a club,
no, nothing. Yeah, no, nothing really like that. And that's the part that I saw once I got in the inside. So, so I didn't really listen to it, that much, but certainly I'm aware of it, and I knew that it was a competitor in the ratings and things like that. And the weird thing is, I remember getting to 105.3 and talking to God, I almost feel like I should say this for the podcast. In fact, I'm going to. I will save this.
Say it. No, say it. We'll be on the podcast.
You can say it now. It's going to be on the podcast anyway.
There's only
Okay. I just remember, like, in the initial, sit down meeting with Gavin and everything, he just said, kind of like apropos of nothing, he's like, and just be sure, when you're on the air, you don't ever say anything negative about Russ Martin. And I was like, but at the time, I'm like, okay, sure. Like, I wasn't planning on doing, like, okay, yeah, sure. That's all I thought of it. But I didn't realize that he was saying that because Russ Martin was going to torpedo or try to not only me, but you, just anything that wasn't him, right?
Yeah.
So
well, he had to say that to you first, because he knew what you didn't, which was that Russ was going to go on the air and do 2 hours on how terrible you are and how you should have an income, and he just wanted to make sure that you knew that you were not allowed to retaliate, or else he just didn't.
Yeah, he just didn't explain it that way. So that happened, and then and then I just saw, like, oh, okay, so that like, the guy's got his own studio, and all these guys are kind of closed off, and you just sort of. But I would normally, I mean, I didn't see them that much because when I was going into the studio to do my prep, I actually liked them being in a different studio because that meant we could get into our studio as early as we
Right.
wanted, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would go in there, me and Mike Turley, who produced my show, we'd go in, plenty early and start doing our stuff. But the one thing I remember, I mean, the first time I remember the first time I saw it, and then I would just see it with such regularity, is I would park, I would walk in, and they would be in the process of faking all of these bits that they did. Like they would be claiming that, they set the program director's office on fire or they set off some fireworks. And I'd park and I'd walk by some filing cabinet in the parking lot that has a microphone up to it and some fireworks going off in it. And there's some guy down the hall screaming like he's been set on fire. And, now, I mean, I'm older now. I don't guess I don't really care anymore. But at the time, I was like, oh, the lack of integrity.
Yeah,
It
was a bit offensive. It was a bit offensive to
Yeah.
people who actually wreck their guts trying to create real connective conversation, and then to realize that, oh, you mean I had a bit of an experience with that kind of thing before I moved here. We had a guy in Chicago named Mancow, and Mancow received national attention because somebody called in to his radio show and they were going to jump off a bridge. And Mancow spent 2 hours. Didn't play no commercials, man. Didn't do nothing. We're staying with this kid live because he needs our help. And he basically talked him off the bridge and saved his life. Entertainment Tonight picked up the story. And it just everybody reported it like it was true. And it was just a dude in another studio pretending to be. And I thought to myself, it would be so easy to do the most compelling, heart-wrenching radio ever if you just did it on a script, if you weren't just trying to have, real moments created out of whole cloth organically. That's the trick. That's Howard. That's what Howard did, So I was always a bit offended at the idea that, oh my God, that one-liner he had was so funny. And then somebody goes, yeah, he's got a whole list of one-liners on a notepad right next to him that he'll just pick and choose. It's a little, it's like, but hey, incredibly successful. So I guess you just got to, what do you care? I don't care so much about that anymore. I really don't. Because like I said, I think we've all become more theatrical in some way, shape, or form. And entertainment takes less specific forms now. I mean, you know what I mean? With podcasting and create. Yeah, James, go ahead.
It wasn't, he actually, I don't want to say he had a soft side, but he didn't shut everybody out. I remember he would do bits where he would have Jagger on his show. Did he ever allow you on his show, Richard? Because I know he damn sure didn't allow Pugs or Kelly.
No, Kelly went on the show a bunch of times. I never did.
Yeah. So the weird thing about him is that I had met him a couple of times when he was on the Eagle. And I met him because I knew this guy, Chris Ryan, who was on the Eagle.
Sure.
And to me, I mean, I met him, whatever. He didn't have any of the attitude or the ego or whatever. I mean, I remember having and I don't even know if he would have remembered that, right? Like years later when I was actually on the same station as him. But he was just kind of this I remember he was wearing like a skinny tie and he had the mullet and, just kind of definitely he had that vibe in the 90s, like he was left over from the 80s kind of thing,
Yeah.
And
he looked like the height of fashion in 1986. Unfortunately, it was 1992.
Yeah, he looked like Jimmy Hart.
Jimmy Hart.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty
Jimmy
good.
Hart.
That's pretty good. Yeah. And so I had sort of interacted with him a few times then just because I was around Chris and up at that station and everything. But by the time I got to 105.3, all I ever knew was that no is the answer. I was never on a show. I never even talked to him. But we never even, I don't think, ever came face to face. But I remember one of the sales guys telling me that, and he was not the sales guy wasn't like being a dick about this. He was just kind of like telling me candidly, he's like, yeah, man, I don't know. He's like, I talked to Russ about your show, and he's like, Russ is just like, I just don't get it. And I just remember thinking, good, like that's probably a positive indicator, but I think what it really was that he probably realized that those things that we were doing we were really doing. And the characters that we had, those are real people.
Yeah.
And here I am, faking this whole thing. And I'm, and also just kind of not being a very interesting person. That was, to me, that was his greatest sin, was just, you're just kind of a generic guy from Mansfield or wherever he was from.
Yeah.
And you've got this whole like smoke and mirrors act. And, I'm coming in there and I'm legitimately cutting myself with broken glass, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I'm letting it all hang out. So that's what I remember about that. But I will also say this, and I don't know if you're going this far or not, but this is really where I started really developing the respect for Pugs and Kelly, because you guys, man, you guys were like survivors. And you'd put up with that
Until
way
we
longer
weren't.
than, yeah, but for a long time. And look at you now. Look at what we're doing right now. Like you had put up with that a lot longer, with that whole Russ Martin business and the politics of the station and everything. But even after that, the way you guys kept, you were at, I was trying to think the other day, because when you reached out, and I was trying to think, okay, can I even remember the lineage? And I remember there was like, you were at the Bone for a minute, and
Mhm.
then something was going on there, and then you were at the other place, and until James said it, that's when I started laughing. I couldn't remember. It was Rational
Yeah,
Radio.
how do you not
That
remember that?
name.
When we all went in and tried to create our own radio station, we leased the signal, we
No,
got the sponsors, we did it all, and you don't even remember
no,
that.
no, no, no. I remember the whole experience. I remember the
Okay.
whole. I just forgot it was called Rational Radio.
Yeah.
And yes, I remember, because that guy that owned that thing, he was like this old
David.
hippie, like Birkenstock wearing liberal, and I loved him.
Yeah.
He was like, he was too nice for this dirty business. Like,
David enjoyed talk radio, and he made some money, and he
yeah,
wanted to do something, and he had no idea the cesspool that he was wading into. It was just,
yeah,
it destroyed that good, kind-hearted soul of a man.
yep, yep.
Just,
But
remember looking in his office and just seeing him behind his desk, and he's all. It depended on the month, but there would be some different cast or some different kind of bandage on something, or he was a wonderful man, but man, did radio
he,
destroy him.
yeah, he was. But even at that though, you guys, like I said, you showed up every day there, and then
Well,
and then I mean, you just find a way. Like I said, you're still talking to people, you're still reaching people. Like, I just really respected that, so still do. But I mean,
thank you.
that was that was what was so, we're telling all the horror stories, but that was, and I don't know that I ever saw a lot of people like you guys that I could relate to in that way, because at the ticket, it was like either people that had gone to school for this stuff or been in it for years and years. I just didn't see anybody who seemed to sort of come up organically. It just seemed to me like you guys had.
Well, yeah. I mean, we came up. I look at the way that like James came up, and I think he came up.
Mhm.
I came up in a very similar way to him.
Yeah.
Kelly and I both did. I mean, we started out at the very bottom, and then it took years
Mhm.
for us to slowly climb up the ladder. And they would say, 2 years into it, don't worry, one day you'll be in place to get a break. And it was true.
Mhm.
It was true.
So when
Mhm.
Kelly
did
got our
when
break.
did when did Richard leave Live 105.3?
I left when and Pugs reminded me of this earlier. I had forgotten that they had left, and then I was still there. But that is true. That did happen, because I think Ben and Skin maybe were on. Boy, talk about some other guys that they survived.
Yeah,
But
thrive.
but they had come over. But I don't remember how much longer it lasted after that, but basically I was cut loose when the station converted to sports. So, and this is interesting. So, I knew that sale was going to happen, and I can't remember how I knew. I don't know, somebody tipped me off like a couple of days beforehand. So I pretty much, oh yes, I got it. Wait, I got it. You guys will love this bit. So we're doing our regular Wild Ass Circus show on 105.3, and Gavin tells me, "Hey, your show is going to start like 2 hours later than it normally does, just on this one particular night. because we're going to carry a football game between the San Diego Chargers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was like two teams that had nothing
Just a
to do with Dallas.
rando game. Boy,
Right.
they obviously signed some agreement to carry clearances for some radio network. That's not a
That
good
was
indicator.
it.
Yeah.
That was it. And they're testing something out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, all right. So I'm telling Turley, and Turley is sweating. He's like, oh no, this is where all this is headed. I know exactly what they're, and I knew too, right? But so we still had like a half the length of our normal show to do after this game ended. So I went on. I didn't tell Turley I was going to do this. I didn't tell anybody. I come on the air, and whatever show we had planned, I didn't do that at all. I came right out of the gate. I gave the score that I think, the Buccaneers. It was definitely the Chargers. I remember the Chargers were definitely involved. Okay, and the other team had beat the Chargers, and what I remember was, and boy, this is just me clinging to the little bit of sports knowledge I had. I said the Chargers were being quarterbacked by, I think, Ryan Leaf,
Sure,
who had been with the Cowboys for a minute or something. And I come on and I said, by God, Ryan Leaf cannot be trusted with leading this team. I said the Chargers have not been the same since the era of Dan Fouts. And I dug in on this, and I gave out the phone number 214-787-1053. Tell me I'm wrong. Let me hear your take. And Turley's looking across the console for me like, what the hell are you doing, right?
You're taking sports calls.
Right. And I'm doing
Dan Fouts.
I'm doing like a straight sports show. You know what I mean? Like the kind you hear on ESPN overnight, the network. And so like slowly but surely people started getting in on the bit, right? So we were getting calls from like people, the regular 105.3 crowd going, well, I think the Chargers could package a trade here and, maybe try to get blah, blah, blah in here and, maybe change up the offensive scheme. I tell you that. So anyway, we just did this for 2 hours just to see how long we could go with it.
That's like, James, were you with us the day after the Janet Jackson Nipplegate at the Super Bowl? Remember when Janet Jackson?
Oh, I certainly was. Yeah.
We, Richard, I don't know if you recall this. James, you probably do. So it was the next day. It was Monday morning after the Super Bowl where Justin Timberlake tore, Janet Jackson's top off.
Yeah.
In the whole world.
Is that the one we watched at Bell Bottoms?
Yes, that was the Bell Bottoms one. Yeah, Bell Bottoms Super Bowl. So the next morning we all come in and we have these new edicts from CBS Radio because that was on CBS. And
we had a meeting like 12 hours later. How do they do that?
And Richard, this memo that they put out of the new guidelines on how all of our talk radio shows are to conduct themselves. And they were absurd. They were like, we didn't even understand it. There was like 99 things that we had. So what we decided to do was we just scrapped our entire show. And James, you remember what we did and said? We took calls the whole show.
No.
Don't you remember? What's your favorite puppy? We took calls for 90 minutes from people just calling in, telling us their favorite kind of puppy and why they're the cutest puppy and why other puppies aren't as cute as this particular. We did puppy talk for 90 seconds because it was the only safe place that we thought we could go with our conversation. It was.
Wait, so did that save your show in the format flip? Were you on it when it was sports for a while?
Are you talking to me? Oh,
that
night? No.
Yeah. So how long until Gavin fired you after that?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that seemed like that happened a couple of weeks before the actual flip. No. And so, yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, James, because I forgot to say how it ended. So a couple of weeks later, someone called me. Might have been Robbie Bowen. Remember Robbie from Sales? Big Robbie.
Yeah.
And he might have called me and said, "Hey, I don't know if you've turned on the station today, but apparently," and he'd done it. Gavin did this in the middle of someone's show, and I want to say it might have been the morning show. I can't remember, but apparently he charged in. If I remember this correctly, I don't mean to malign, but as I recall, they told me that he had come into the studio. He'd sort of taken it over, like he told everybody to leave. and then he took over the board and started playing marching band music.
Like
That's
college
what I
fight
remember.
songs? Like
Yes.
that kind of marching band? Okay. All right.
And so it went all day long, and I was supposed to go to work that night, right?
Mhm.
But he never called to tell me the show was canceled. So I didn't show up, but I think what I did was I remember being in my car at the time that our show would come on the air. And I thought to myself, well, I'll listen to the marching band music. And then if it's straight up 7 o'clock, that ends and we've got dead air, that means I still have a gig because I would then have been the show.
Right. Yeah. That's not
But the
there.
marching band, the band played on.
Well,
The
there you go.
marching band kept playing, and at 7:01, that was my indication that we were done.
And then what, the next day, did you get a phone call or was it just
No,
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 you just never showed up again?
Wow.
yeah, no, we
Look,
never
we have
showed
confirmation. Hugh says he remembers the marching band music stunt.
Okay, yeah. And so no, we never showed up again. And then I feel like, well, no, I know I did because I saw Gavin years later when he was still there, right?
He's still
Yeah.
there now. Yeah.
Okay. So I saw him. I think I don't even know if I was still living here, but I came back to Dallas and or living there, and I was at 105.3, and uh he he was that might he's like, hey buddy, but that might have been like, I haven't seen you since the last show.
So there was no,
Um,
you didn't have to, they didn't give you a severance or anything like that?
no,
No, it was just, "Okay, we don't
no.
need you anymore."
It's
Well,
it's been a long time, but I remember it
oh,
being very informal. I remember
oh.
it like they just kind of quit calling, you know.
You were doing a nightly show, and they
Yeah.
just one day played band music, big band music,
Yep.
college band music. You recognized, you could tell the climate that was in the air. You didn't go in, and that's it. That's all she wrote. You guessed right.
Yeah.
No,
Pretty much.
no awkward goodbyes between
Oh, and
you.
look, there's a nobility in like when a girl tries to break up with you. It's like, you know what? Just she stopped calling. I get it. I'm not gonna badger her. But there's no need to.
He didn't have to slink back into his wild ass circus office and take his box of sex toys out. He
No.
never got an opportunity to do that.
All right. Hey, can I ask for dirt though, straight up? Do you have any Russ Martin horror stories, or maybe what is your worst Russ Martin horror
Why has it
story?
got to be Russ Martin though? See, this is what
Because he was the dick of the no one has a
I
Big A
think
Steven
there's a-
horror story.
I think there's a lot of stories.
Yeah.
I think any stories, doesn't have to be just Russ, but if you got one, why not?
Yeah, no, I mean, my stuff, like I said, I always thought his greatest offense was just kind of being a bland person. So I from afar, or not afar, it was just down the hall. But like when I'd walk in, I'd see that crap being faked. I was just like, okay, you're a fraud. Like that was kind of the last bit of mine that I really hated him so much until the domestic abuse thing happened. And when that happened, because it had made the news, right? Like his girlfriend accused him of beating her up and
Yeah.
he got arrested, right?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, actually, more than thinking, because I remember we got this talking to about like, hey, nobody mention anything about this, nobody do anything and don't make any reference to it. And I remember that I played my own return music always. I like to pick it out like a playlist, like play some cool stuff. And I remember I played coming back from a break, I played Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth. And for no reason. I mean, just I like Buffalo Springfield, right?
Yeah.
And I remember the next day Gavin asking me because that guy Lee, the assistant program director,
Yeah.
he had listened to the night show. I don't know if they had him like monitoring or something, but he had listened to it and reported that we had played Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth, and it seemed suspect because it has the line, "There's something happening here."
Yeah.
Hey, what's that sound?
Yeah.
Like, And I think, okay, because what, that's related to Kent State, and there were gunshots.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know what their thinking was, but
Yeah,
I
like
remember
shooting
basically
at the
just
National
going,
Well,
Guard.
look,
Right.
I know what it is because Lee presented it to Gavin. He didn't call it for what it's worth. He called it the "What's Happening Here" song. That's how he relayed it to Gavin, and he made it sound like you did it intentionally to draw attention to the fact that there's an elephant in the room at the station that nobody was talking about. I don't believe for 1 minute that it was as innocent as you put it. I think Lee caused a lot of trouble. I think
oh
that
yeah.
he did a lot of shit stirring, and I think that's an incident where he probably did, because that absolutely has nothing. I mean, that's silly to think.
Well,
Yeah.
look, you said one thing that I pointed out to other people in the fact that I worked adjacent to the guy for 3 years. Like I saw him not every day, but almost every day for 3 years. And at the end of it, I don't think he knew my name. I don't think he knew who I was. Like it's one thing to sort of have anonymity in the office, but to not even have the interest to accidentally know the guy's name who you see on an almost daily basis. You kind of said the same thing. Like, does he even know you? Did you talk to him socially once?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, he
You know,
absolutely knew who he was because, well, I mean, I've heard stories about Russ not particularly caring for the kind of radio that Dick did.
Well, I should phrase that better. Did you ever have one social conversation with him?
no, nothing like that. Never after I was at 105.3. Like I said, way back when, I met him a couple of times at the Eagle, just, because he was introduced by another jock or whatever. But I don't think there was any sense of threat at that point. I mean, to him, I'm just like some guy. So I don't think there was any insecurity or anything. Can I just say something real quick though?
Yeah.
Because you were asking about like other 105.3 characters and stuff. Not that this would mean anything to anyone that listened, maybe, because I don't think you ever heard him on the air. But that guy, Lee Harris, he, I remember when I went to 105.3 and he was introduced to me as the assistant program director.
Now, hold on. Now, Lee is the guy we were just talking about who I said probably misrepresented Dick's intention playing the
Yeah,
Buffaloes. That's Lee. Yeah. The guy who
yeah,
I believe ratted out Dick to Gavin. That's who
yeah,
Dick's talking about now.
I had not been in radio that long, but I'd been around radio long enough to know that your program directors and even your assistant program directors and those types, a lot of times they wore ties and, they tried to fit in with like the other end of the floor, where all the corporate people worked. And this guy was like, he was like an old biker. And he would have like a whole like thing of keys hanging from his chain on his belt, like a, like an apartment complex
I was just gonna
maintenance
say,
man or
he's like
something.
a maintenance guy at some apartment complex off the tollway.
Yeah,
Driving a white
yeah,
pickup truck. Used to bring his wife to work, make her sit in the
yeah,
office.
yeah. He was a wild character.
Yeah.
That was something.
Yeah. Well, I've heard some. I've heard. I did. A lot of people told me about their dealings with him. Like a lot of the producers, the people who he had power over. I guess he
Oh
made
yeah.
the schedule or something like that. And
Oh okay.
so,
I see.
James, you might know this when you were
Yeah,
there.
he was my boss. He was my first boss because he was the one who controlled the schedule for the board ops, and that was my first job aside from being an intern. As I finally got hired on,
I got a lot of the producers and stuff would come to me and complain about him, and I'm like, well, I don't even know what he does.
I,
Radio.
I mean, he was a hard ass, but he was like, if your football coach is a dick, like you've dealt with hard asses before, and some people are just going to be dicks, and it doesn't mean they don't like you. It's just business, and if they say terse things, well, maybe you shouldn't do so much wrong. Try and stay on that.
Radio is such a weird business. You mentioned Tom Likas a little while ago. One of the stories I tell the most, and one of the things that always stuck with me about that whole 105.3 era was actually a one-on-one dinner moment that I had with Tom Likas. So this guy
Is this
would
at
come
True
into
Lux?
Might have been the Lodge.
Okay,
I think it was the Lodge.
because
Well,
I
it sounds more likely.
have a very similar Tom Likas experience at
Okay.
True Lux, but go
Okay.
ahead. Let me hear yours.
So he comes in, of course, he's on after my show, and he's the misogynist guy. You know, like the whole show's like, disregard women, you know, like that.
Yeah.
And and obviously I realized, okay, this is some kind of a character. But what I did remember was I remembered randomly hearing him on like overnight AM talk radio, maybe 10 years before that,
Yeah,
and he was a liberal guy. He was like a liberal call-in guy,
he
right?
was a great late night talk show host out of LA. He was great.
Yeah.
Just mainstream, no politics really, but it was all just fence post conversation topics. He was
Yeah.
great. He was great.
Yeah, so I remembered that. I kind of brought it up. I'm like, I think I surprised him maybe that I listened to that. So, oh, yeah, I remember hearing you this, that. So we start talking, and I think we're having like he's wearing the sunglasses indoors, you know, because he's still got to have that look. But we're just having this very kind of like monotone conversation about, I think it was like immigration reform or something. I mean, you know, some kind of heady topic. And some guy walks up to the table in the middle of dinner and he goes, Tom, Dad. I think they always called him Dad or something. He was like, I did what you said. I left my wife when she was pregnant, you know, or something like that. And and Tom looks up at him. Tom looks up at him and he goes, ha ha, like that. And the guy walks away and Tom just goes, ah. And he's like, he goes, and he looks at me, right? Tom looks at me and he's like, always remember something. He goes, we are to some degree celebrities to the people that listen to us. He goes, but we are the absolute lowest rung of celebrity
Yeah.
that exists. He goes, no one falls from radio to something else. He goes, he goes, actors go from, you know, film to television. Singers go from, you know, concerts to radio. No one ever falls from radio to another place. He's like, never forget that.
Well, I didn't have that kind of a situation. I was always very look Tom Likas' show back then. It was incel radio before we had a term for incels. That's what it was.
Radio.
It's close.
He was ahead of the time. So Kelly was anti Tom Likas, and we very openly on our show made fun of the Tom Likas show and all that stuff. And then we found ourselves being taken out to dinner with him. And it was very awkward and very weird. And, you know, you could hear the knives clicking on the plates, right? I mean, it was people, nobody was talking. And he's sitting there, you know, he's wearing like a black zip up hoodie with, you know, this like Beatles mop top hair and the wraparound black sunglasses, you know, and he's just eating his steak and fish at True Lux.
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, I think Kelly had left and it was just me and him. And I think maybe Gavin or somebody else had left. It was just me and him at the table. And for about 5 minutes, we just had a really nice conversation about radio. and all of this stuff that I had built up into my head, like all the trash that I had talked about, I was like, wait a second. He's actually not that. Like I knew to some degree that it was a character, but to see him be a decent guy, you know, just a regular guy and become a human being for a moment, I thought that was interesting. But yeah, you saw him have to break character and then jump right back into it, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, he's a very, very highly regarded talk show host in Los Angeles. I mean, going back to the 1970s when he broke in. And this whole Likas, wasn't Likas After Dark or something? Isn't that what they called it? That was a whole cloth reinvention of who he had been for 25, 30 years in Los Angeles. And so interesting guy. Hey, Dick, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
Obviously, we're gonna, you know, you're involved in this, right? And however we take this, we certainly think that your point of view, right, James? We're happy to be welcoming Dick in as another producer of the Who Killed Live 105.3 project.
Oh my God, his contributions could only help.
All right.
I appreciate that. And it's been good for me because it got my, you know, I'll tell you this, I have kept everything I have ever done on the air. every minute that I have ever spent on the air, I have on tape or a CD or something.
MP3.
There's so much of it that I don't necessarily have it all well cataloged, but I do all have it all. And just having this conversation with you has kind of jogged my memory about a lot of things. So I'll remember more and more of those things. Yeah.
All right. Well, as we move forward, we hope you join us again on the show. And if you have any ideas on interviews and people we need to talk to, we'll have regular little conversations about this. Yes, James.
I would like both of y'all to answer this question because I like the way you two bounce off of each other. Is Live 103, Live 105.3 had a nice little run of success, you know, even with its cancers. Could it be tried right now and be successful again? The radio landscape has changed in the last 15 years.
Dick, go ahead. I'll let you go first.
Why don't do you want a teaser? Because I mean, I can go a long while on that, but I'll tell you this: I can tell you why it wouldn't. But there's a lot of reasons why. Are we doing that? I don't know if you want to do that now or you want to wait.
Yes, do it now.
Maybe we should do that. You know, if you want me to come on again, a couple of these
yeah. Let's okay. So I just put it. I don't believe it could, James.
No,
I think that I think that if you were to strip away a lot of what 105.3 was, you'd have to strip away, you know, the overt sexuality, you know, of the station. I don't know that plays today. Radio's different. It needs to be more homogenized, really, which, you know, is strange because with podcasting, you can get as specifically weird in any direction as you want. But terrestrial radio, I don't think that could work today. And that's what I think is really interesting, that it was only 10 years. It was only 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And how completely different the world is today based on, I mean,
I agree. And also, I would go even further, and we can get into that later, but I would go even further on the way that people consume media now. I think you'd have a big hurdle there too. And then also like, you know, conglomerates, like, you know, a few companies owning everything. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that could be problematic.
I think the biggest one is social media. I think that when we were in a world where there wasn't social media and things, you'd say it on the radio, and unless somebody happened to have been recording it at that moment, it was gone forever, right? You couldn't prove that it was said. Now with social media, you know, and now with, you know, all of these shows being streamed and Odyssey has these players with the playbacks and all that, you say anything, even, you know, slightly provocative, you know, they've got it cut up and they're putting it on Twitter, and all of a sudden, before you know it, there are 15,000 people in a market that doesn't even get your show calling for you to be fired. It's a much different time. You'd have to be.
No, it's a great point. I mean, now I could tweet something and I can delete it, and somebody will have screenshotted it before I deleted it. Back then, and again, you're talking just 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I remember being at, did I do this at 105.3? I think I did. All right. I think statute of limitations has run out.
Okay.
I'll close with this. How about that? And then I'll close with this. This is a good one to close on. In a couple of weeks, if you guys want, these bandages will be off in a couple of weeks, and I'll come on and do video next time.
Very good.
You guys can see my new facelift. But anyway, so we did a show at 105.3. I've been friends for a long time with all the guys in Blues Traveler, John Popper, the harmonica player, and all those guys, right?
Yeah.
And so they were playing a show at, I want to say it was like House of Blues in Dallas. And we had the idea that we would do our show live from their dressing room, because they had ISDNs in there and stuff like that. This was before you could just do stuff over Wi-Fi. So they had a connection in there. So the idea was this: we would do our show while the band was playing. You'd kind of hear the band playing through the wall, right? And in their dressing room. And then when the band came off the stage, they would join us for like the last hour of the show. It seemed like a great concept, whatever. We did not take into account how drunk John Popper would be when he got off stage and came into the dressing room. So we've been broadcasting for 2 hours. Here the band comes all sweaty, you know, and having you know, are pretty high. John sits down and is always a great guest on the radio, but at this point, no concept of not using language that you can't say on the radio. So we keep dumping it. We keep dumping it. We keep dumping it. We ran out of delay.
Of course.
And he's still on. And we had this feature. Do you remember that feature we had where people could text us? They would text and it would come up on a computer screen in the studio.
Yeah, we had a text line. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're texting us, but it would come up on a laptop, right? And we could respond to it through the laptop. So we have that laptop out there while this is all happening, and we're all like panicking about, I think we're running out of delay. And I see one of these texts on that laptop come up. And some listener says, I clearly just heard John Popper say motherfucker on the radio. And then you're seeing like one after another come up. I did too. I heard it, right?
Okay.
Turley and I go back to the studio after, I'm lowering my voice like somebody might overhear me right now. Turley and I go back to the studio after that whole thing was done, because fortunately it was after hours, so nobody was in there. And I cracked that computer open and figured out how to erase all the evidence.
The master tape. You got into the master tape at the studio.
So there was, and the text.
Wow.
I got into the text program. I figured out how to get rid of all the text and the master. There was no evidence of it.
That's ballsy. Because didn't you take some heat for bringing O.J. Simpson into the studios?
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Oh, that was one time. I remember that was one time Russ was, I think he got on the air and took a real high road about domestic abuse.
Did he now?
Too soon?
All right, Richard Hunter, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have you on again as we move this project forward. Who Killed Live 105.3, a podcast series coming to RadioMisfits.com. Richard Hunter, James Parker, and myself, Pugs Moran, executive producers of this project. Thank you, Richard.
Hey, have a good one, guys.
Oh, hey, by the way, if people want to follow you or anything you want to plug, there's a lot of people who
these days.
It's easy. Richard Hunter at Twitter and Instagram. Just go to one of those.
Just Richard Hunter at Twitter and Instagram. All right, thank you, Richard. We'll be in touch soon.
Right. Later, guys.
All right, there he goes. All right, look at that. Our old friend Richard Hunter. He's what, did I lose James? What, is James gone? Okay, all right.
No, I'm here. I'm just setting up you to do like your little final.
Nah, we're good. You want to say bye? You can just say bye. I'm good.
Hey, y'all check out Florida stories. My numbers were down. I was on the upslope and it kind of plateaued off. So go back and check it out again, you buttholes.
Yeah, what the hell, man?
Podcast. It's free. It's literally free. I'm asking you to like push the screen with your thumb a few times. Oh, I'm asking. Don't be a lazy a-hole. Okay.
No.
Kids. 4 kids.
There he goes. I'm doing it right now. All right. We'll be back tomorrow night for another Pillow Talk with Pugs and Parker. We do it every Monday through Thursday, 9 p.m. Tomorrow, I'll be doing a high noon show. I do high noon. That's current events, headlines, hot topics, all that stuff. My voice is getting weird. It started out weird today. Today I promised I would do a high noon show today, but then I had my kid, and my kid was off school, and really, let's just hang out. So forgive me. He and I, it was a beautiful day today. We just kind of hung out and kicked around. But I will be doing a high noon show tomorrow, so we'll see you there. That's it. All right, love you guys. See you tomorrow at noon. Bye.